Camps are opening. Football is on its way. We're just a couple days away from scrimmages taking place for several teams. Some teams have been on the field for a week now. Those teams that are participating in week 0, there's a lot of action right now happening on the football field. But, and I say this with the big B, because I really don't like talking about this stuff this time of year. It's a little bit of a necessary evil because it's driving conversation and people are reacting strongly to it. And I think the casual audience of college football is interested in where the dominoes are going to fall here. So I completely understand that it is necessary, but I'm just going to be completely honest. I just want to talk about quarterback competitions. I want to talk about the hierarchy of teams in the Big 12. I want to know, is it a 2-team race in the ACC? Like, those are the things that interest me, but I want to talk dark horses. I want to talk hot seat. Like, those are the things I'm really interested in. I don't like NIL. I don't like realignment. I don't like those things. I just don't. Want to know why? Because it's kind of uncomfortable for me. If you want me to be totally honest, like, I am a college football fan that grew up during an era in which there was regional biases that were really advantageous to the sport. The West Coast had a superiority complex over the Midwest, who had a superiority complex out of the East Coast, who had a superiority complex over the Southeast, who had a superiority complex over everybody. It's just, I like when there's some regionality to the sport, and the fact that we're abandoning that makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to be honest with you. When I think Big 10, I don't think Los Angeles. When I think Big 12, I don't think Arizona. When I think SEC, I don't really think Texas. But they're obviously very involved now. So I'm okay with it. I get that that's really nothing we can do about it, so we might as well just engage in the conversation. I want to talk for just a moment about the Big 10. And there are rumors out there. Brett McMurphy had it. Nicole Auerbach had it. Several at The Athletic have confirmed it, that there are people and I guess presidents in power in the Big 10 that are starting to explore the possibility of a further expansion, meaning that there's going to be the possibility of Washington, Oregon, Cal, Stanford on the West Coast potentially joining the Big 10. A couple things I don't understand about this. I don't understand why, if Apple says that the Pac-12 is worth $20 million per school, why would the Big 10 engage with programs that have been viewed to be valued there when they have already viewed their own programs somewhere between 70 and 90 million per school per year? It's a pretty big gap. The other thing I would say too, do you really need the West Coast? The only way I can see the Big 10 being willing to add those schools is because they determine over the course of time that the traveling circumstances for USC and UCLA become a significant disadvantage for them on the playing field in all their sports, I might add. So UCLA having to travel thousands of miles a year is actually hurting their football product or their Olympic sport product. Same can be said for SC. That's why I think you might have to further expand West and to create a division within the Big 10 of West Coast schools. So I think the only way you do it is if you feel as though there's a competitive disadvantage to the West Coast teams in your league. That's the only reason why it makes sense, because financially, I have a ton of respect for Washington, ton of respect for Oregon, some respect for Cal, some respect for Stanford. Not being light, I wonder sometimes about their commitment to football, but that's a conversation that we can have on a different day. So I have a ton of respect for them, but I don't necessarily view them as equal to what money would be distributed by Fox, NBC, and CBS. One more thing. If I were in charge of the Big 10, I replaced Tony Petitti in an interim basis. Let's say Tony Petitti, hey, Greg, come tell me what you would do. He would never do that. But here's what I would do if I were in charge of the Big 10. I'm not encroaching on anyone's territory if I go west. Like, we own the West Coast right now with USC and UCLA. Do we need to have a monopoly on the West Coast? Given the interest in the product, probably not. Just being completely honest, probably not. But you know where there's a lot of interest in college football? In the Southeast. and along the eastern seaboard. Because right now, I know UCF joined the Big 12. And I understand that West Virginia is in the Big 12. But when you look at the East Coast and the Atlantic seaboard and Florida and South Carolina, that is owned by one league right now. And that's the Southeastern Conference. And if I were Tony Petitti, and if I were the Big Ten, I would be exploring every possible avenue that I could to engage in discussions with Clemson, to engage in discussions with Florida State, to entertain the idea of maybe considering Miami, along with North Carolina and Virginia. Like the East Coast to me, for the Big Ten, would be far more advantageous than the West Coast because you're encroaching now on your biggest competitor's turf. The SEC has no interest in going west. They say you can have it. Go for it. But the SEC wants to continue to dominate the Southeast, which they have for quite a while. But if you start encroaching on their territory, that's when I think you could get the SEC to potentially react. And maybe in order to get out in front of it, maybe they entertain the idea of adding Clemson, Florida State, maybe others, in an effort just to keep the Big Ten out of the Southeastern footprint in the United States. So that's where I stand on the whole realignment angle, is that the SEC, they hold true to their values in geography. They feel like geography is a strength of theirs. The Big Ten kind of punted on that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But they punted on that by adding two West Coast programs, two big-time West Coast programs, I might add. So I think they added good value by getting out west and getting SC and getting UCLA. Will they continue to go west if you want to? Sure, but I just don't think juice is worth the squeeze. If you're really going to make an impact and really shake things up, you start making phone calls to Clemson, South Carolina, and Tallahassee, Florida. That would be my play if I were the Big Ten. So all this scuttlebutt about the West Coast and all this other stuff, that seems fine. Feels like a distraction to me. Hey, guys, we're considering these. And then, boom, they strike. They go after North Carolina, Virginia, Clemson, and Florida State. Or Miami, whatever. You get the point. Watch the East Coast. I'd focus a lot more on the East Coast as it relates to realignment and grant of rights conversations, all these other things. I'd watch that part of the country before I watch the West Coast right now because it doesn't feel realistic that moves are going to happen out west.